Hello there everybody, it's Prime here from Dracula X and StupidlyEPIC.com. It's another video to talk about games again today. Yeah, I've got a game series that I'd like to talk about today. A lot of you have probably heard about. It's not something that I've actually gotten fully into. Like, I really like the games, but I've never gotten to the point where the games are like, you know, I'm not like a collector of the series or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure there's tons of people who have got like all the games and all that. But the games are really fun. They're really cool. Castlevania. Castlevania is obviously about vampires. Transylvania, Castlevania is like vampires and like, you know, Dracula and all that sort of stuff. And I've only got two of the games, but I've got them here. One of them is Dracula X Chronicles for the PSP, which includes 3 games actually. Dracula X Chronicles is like a sort of 2.5D reimagining of the original Rondo of Blood / Dracula X for the PC Engine console that came out. It was like a CD-based console called PC Engine, and this game here is like it's like a remake of it, but it also includes the original Rondo of Blood, which is really cool because it was never translated outside of Japan at all. Like it was like a Japanese only game because the PC Engine was primarily, you know, like Asian market sort of thing, and it was never translated in English. But this game's got a bonus unlock of the whole game, but it's translated in English. It's really cool. Rondo of Blood's probably my favourite Castlevania game. I've played several of them. I've not played any of the DS ones, like, you know, the Game Boy Advance ones or anything like that, but I've played a wee bit of the first Castlevania. I've played and completed Super Castlevania IV for the SNES, which is really good. I've played and completed Dracula X Chronicles and subsequently Rondo of Blood. Also, Symphony of the Night is another unlock on this. It's got a it's like the original one on the PS1, but it's like some of the voices have been re-recorded and things like that, because I don't know, they probably tried to uncheesy the voices or something like that, so they re-recorded the dialogue for this version of the game. But they're really good though. Like this, if you're a fan of Castlevania at all and you haven't got this, like, I'm pretty sure you would have already had it, but if you don't have it, pick it up because it's fairly cheap and you get 3 games in one, like a full remaking of Rondo of Blood and Rondo of Blood translated into English, and Symphony of the Night. Fantastic game. The only thing that I really want is I need a PSP 2000 because I want to play these games on the big screen. I don't want to just sit like looking at my PSP all day, like tiny screen. I'd like to get like I've got a 1000. I've got the ceramic white 1000 PSP, but I'm needing a 2000 so I can, you know, get the AV cables out into the TV so I can play it on the big screen. I'd like to play it on that. Yeah, I'd far prefer Castlevania on a big screen, but that brings me to the next one that I've got. Like, this is only 2 games that I've, like, the Castlevania Dracula X, and I've got what's it called, Laws of Shadow again. I should not have forgotten that. I should have prepared myself before I'd even said that. But yeah, Lords of Shadow is like it's kind of like a prequel, but it's also a reimagining of the series. Like, the original Castlevania starred Simon Belmont, and then, you know, it went to all the other Belmonts. Like this, it's like a legacy of a family that is always destined to go and fight Dracula whenever he reappears and starts scourging humanity again. So each descendant of the Belmont family is kind of destined to go and fight him. But this game here, this is like the story of the very first Belmont, the first ever to appear, like to fight evil. And there's this guy here, obviously, the star of the game, Gabriel Belmont. An awful lot of symbolism in the way the characters are sort of named and things like that, because, like, obviously Gabriel being from the, you know, the Archangel Gabriel from the Bible, and that it's not meant to be him. It's just, you know, the symbolic nature of this guy going from, you know, he's like totally holy, righteous guy. So he's trying to do the work of God. So like obviously they chose the name Gabriel because it sounded kind of holy and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a really really cool game, and it tells the story of the very first Belmont going to fight. Like it kind of there's kind of some sort of plot elements that need kind of tied up, but I'm hoping that they tie them up more in the second game, because they're bringing the second game out soon. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about these games now actually is because I'm kind of excited for the release of the second one, because I like this one so much. I know some people were like, nah, it's a bastardization of the series and all that, and I don't like it. But to be honest, this is the actual first game that I played of it that got me into all the other ones. Like I've played some of them emulated and stuff like that, and like fantastic series, but I probably wouldn't have got into them if it weren't for this. So like, if this is my gateway into playing a great series, then so be it. Like I'd rather play a game that is shunned by some of the community of the series, because they don't think it's a proper Castlevania game, and that's fine. Like that's up to them. Like if they like, it's like loads of people that I've talked to don't like Silent Hill 4, even though I consider it a part of the series. They're like, nah, it wasn't made to be a Silent Hill game, and it doesn't bother me. Like I'd rather sort of leave the argument in peace rather than try and put the matter forward and try and convince them to play it and give it a chance and stuff like that. But yeah, Castlevania Lords of Shadow and Dracula X Chronicles, really really good games. So Castlevania, obviously about the Belmonts going to fight Dracula, and it seems like it's meant to be a different Dracula from the one that you know from Bram Stoker. I don't think it's meant to be the same guy. It's meant to be the same sort of like head, like the ultimate vampire guy, and his name's Dracula, but I don't think it's the same sort of universe as the Bram Stoker stuff. I've not looked too deeply into the Bram Stoker stuff because my gateway into the series was pretty much these games and the concept of vampires and all that. I'm not really into vampire films and anything like that. Like the only reason I would watch Van Helsing is because, oh cool, like vampires, Castlevania, join them together. That's the only, I'm not a massive vampire fan. Like you'd shoot me before I would watch Twilight or something like that. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I don't really know of like what I was going to say about this stuff. I just kind of wanted to say something, because like I picked the games up and I was like, yeah, really want to say something about Castlevania. Like, okay, we'll start from the beginning then. Like, graphically the games are fantastic. Like, they started off on the NES with Castlevania 1, 2 and 3, and then Super Castlevania 4 come on the SNES, and then there was like a Mega Drive, a Genesis version of Castlevania as well. Then it sort of moved on to the PlayStation and Sega Saturn and all that, and then PC Engine and stuff. And yeah, visually the games are like top notch, like as you would expect from Konami. They're really really good developers. And it's bizarre though. Like I didn't want to get too much on a tangent, but I feel like big games companies nowadays are kind of out of touch with like games now. Like, it's the indie developers that they kind of understand what people want to play, and like these big developers are going out their way to make these massive things that it's not the reason why we liked these games when we were younger, because I mean, like, even though the Lords of Shadow was the first one that I played, I still have that I've got the ability to sort of like retroactively appreciate the games that come before. Like, a lot of people, when they play a game, like I know people that played Final Fantasy X as their first Final Fantasy and they're like, it's the best one. And I'm like, well, I played Final Fantasy VII first. Like my first Final Fantasy was 7, and I kind of like, I can't understand why they would only like they would choose 10 over 7, but like I can still get it, like I still understand the reasons for it, but I'm able to sort of like play a game and then retroactively go, yeah, like I totally understand why these games were fantastic and why they decided to make a sequel. But yeah, like I feel like these bigger companies are totally out of touch now. Like it's almost like because they've got so much money and this, like, games are such a massive thing nowadays, they seem to think that people as they grow up, they want, you know, like they kind of think that bigger and more spectacular means better, you know, and it doesn't really. Like, they brought out Harmony of Despair, which is like a downloadable Xbox and PS3 version of like it uses all the same sprite sets as like Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation, and to me that's a fantastic game. But they never done anything with it. They brought out a couple of downloadable maps and stuff like that, but they never really went anywhere with it. Like, I'd love to see like a Castlevania game that was just like gigantic Metroidvania style. You know, that's if you don't understand, like I'm kind of a noob on this matter myself, but I'm sure if you understand what Metroid is and Castlevania is, if you just join them together, that's exactly what Metroidvania is. Metroid has got it's another Nintendo franchise that the way they designed the game is it's kind of like a puzzle. It's kind of like the Dizzy games. What, like, it's essentially, and like, if you've probably never played Dizzy, and if you have, you're about as old as I am. But Dizzy is kind of like, you've got a big map, and to get further one way, you've got to go back all the other way, pick up an item, and then that'll get you further that way. You know, and like, but Metroid done it in like on an X and Y scale. You know, like their maps were like, weren't just left and right; they were up and down as well. So like, but they were huge. They were massive, sprawling maps. So like, Metroidvania is the term coined for like the Castlevania games that employed that same sort of concept of getting things that would make you more powerful to unlock another area in the game. Like in Symphony of the Night, that was one of the first. I think that was the first Metroidvania game, and it's kind of like you're playing as Alucard, and you're building your character's levels up. It's kind of had RPG elements as well. So when you were hitting the characters, you get experience points and stuff like that, and you'd see the little flashes of numbers coming above their head when they hit them and all that. But you would have to go to one area to get an item that would get you further in another area. So they kind of took that same concept that Metroid had and put it into a Castlevania game. So yeah, like, so Harmony of Despair was like a Metroidvania style one on the PS3 and 360, which is, you know, it used all the same assets of Symphony of the Night. And but I think that, like, going back to my original point, these companies sort of, when, and although I do love this game, I love it, I think it's fantastic, but I think they're missing the point. Like, it's a fantastic game, and I have nothing but love for Mercury Steam, the people that made it. Like, fantastic developers, just like Grin, from the folk from the you know, Capcom employed Grin to make Bionic Commando and Bionic Commando Rearmed and all that. Love Grin. Love these guys as well. Like, they've made fantastic, like, this game is fantastic. Can't say enough good about it, but it doesn't feel like these original games. It doesn't feel like this. You know, it feels different. And I'm hoping that they bring back that sort of Metroidvania feel for the next Lords of Shadow, because I've heard it's more of an open world rather than a linear sort of God of War style game. And there's nothing wrong with that though, because the original games like Castlevania 1, 2 and 3 were all linear games. You know, it wasn't like a sprawling Metroidvania style thing. So there's nothing wrong with it being linear. It just feels like they didn't quite understand what made Castlevania originally great, and they just thought, well, everything's moving into 3D now, let's make a big 3D game. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I love the game. I think it's fantastic. It's one of the best games I've played. But yeah, it just feels like Konami are missing the point, and you know, they're missing the point where with their Metal Gear Solid series now. They're starting to lose the script. They're starting to lose this. Like, I think that's arguable. I think me personally, I'm just not happy that, you know, Kojima sort of flung David Hayter to the side, because I mean, he's one of the reasons that made Metal Gear Solid great. You know, like, you can't just not have David Hayter as Snake in Metal Gear Solid. But again, that's me going off on a tangent. I'm not going to go into that. But like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like these bigger companies are kind of like, we've got to put more into it. We've got to make it a bigger game so that when we spend this 30 million or whatever they're putting into the game, we can make back more because it's bigger and people are going to love it. It just doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, that's one aspect of it I'm not happy with. But on the other aspect, the games look great. You know, they spare no expense to make the games look as gorgeous as they can be on the hardware that they've got. The music is another thing. Like, Bionic Commando's music sends shivers up my spine with how amazing it is. But like, Castlevania does the same thing to me. Castlevania has got really, really good theme tunes, and that's one thing that you could harken back to the good old days of classic gaming, retro stuff, is you could say what you will about the games, but the music generally was really good on all these classic games, because they didn't have all these like amazing like symphonic choirs and like orchestras doing all this music. They only had several channels, like 3 or 4 channels to put their music on, so they had to make do with what they had. So melody was the only thing that they really had, you know. So, and anybody that knows me knows that I've already said stuff like this, and like I've picked this up from other places, you know. Like, I wouldn't have thought about it myself. This isn't my own concept, you know. This isn't me thinking deeply on the subject. I've read and listened to other people talk about the subject, and I agree with them. So yeah, like, melody was a huge thing back in the day, you know. And that's one thing. Even though the music is again gorgeous in Castlevania Lords of Shadow, although the music is fantastic and it's gorgeous and it's beautifully orchestrated and stuff like that, it doesn't have the same feel. Just like the game doesn't have the same feel as a Castlevania game. It doesn't feel like Castlevania, and I'm fine with that, because the game's fantastic. I'm able to forgive the game because the game's such a good game. But yeah, like, the original games had really, really good music, like Vampire Killer, Bloody Tears, like tunes like that. The theme, Richter's theme and stuff like that. These tunes were all symbolic, and it felt like they belonged in a certain place. So whenever you play a level, there would be a specific tune playing, so you, like, whenever you hear that tune, you remember yourself playing that level and things, you know. So yeah, like, the music in Castlevania is always absolutely fantastic, regardless of whether it's Lords of Shadow or not. You know, like, if it's Lords of Shadow, great, like, it's nice and orchestrated and stuff like that. In fact, one of my favourite tunes that I've ever heard is from Lords of Shadow. It's called The Warg, W-A-R-G. You can look it up on YouTube and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a really fantastic, really epic theme, and I think that's the kind of, like, the theme tune that they kind of used for, like, the trailers and things like that. Absolutely gorgeous. So if you get a chance, like, look up Castlevania Bloody Tears, Castlevania Vampire Killer, and The Warg from Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Like, the music, like, I can't say enough good about the music. Same with the visuals, but the gameplay is where it's at for Castlevania. Like, it's, again, like, I'm going to be comparing, like, all these retro games to Bionic Commando, because Bionic Commando is one of my favourite games ever. Like, the original, like, NES version of Bionic Commando. They had to do something special to make these games stand out and make people want to buy them, because they would come on cartridges, and these cartridges would be expensive to make. So they had to make these games special, you know. It wasn't like the days of the ZX Spectrum where you could just copy a whole game onto a tape and then just, like, give it to your friend or whatever. These are cartridges, and, like, they were hard, like, they production costs and stuff, you know. But yeah, like, the gameplay in Castlevania is fantastic. Like, it's your classic, like if you're talking Castlevania 1 through Super Castlevania 4, it's the concept, it's the way of thinking in games where they designed really, really well designed levels with enemies spawning at particular areas to get you to react amazingly. It's kind of like Dark Souls or something like that. You know, like you would have to learn the layout of the level in order to get through it. It cost you time to get your head around where enemies would spawn. Like there would be like these Medusa heads that would float past the screen, but they'd be wiggling. You know, they'd have an arc. So like it's not like they just flew straight past. You would have to sort of remember where these things came in and position yourself right so that you can duck down and whip them at the right time when they were coming down. You know, or like there would be like 3 spawning ghouls that would run at you, and if you got yourself in the right position, like you'd use the whip to kill them all at once, or you would, like, if you didn't, you would have to try and jump over them. You'd probably fail because there'd be another enemy jumping at you from like further on in the screen if you tried to jump over them, you know. So it's all really well designed level layout and like very thoughtful character design, and the way the enemies attack and the way your character reacts to those attacks. Like if your character got hit while he was jumping, like in the earlier Castlevania games, if you jumped forward, you had to commit to that jump. You couldn't. It's not like Sonic where you could sort of reverse. Like if you jumped forward in Sonic, you could change the arc of your jump by pressing left or right to try and like accommodate where you would land. In Castlevania, in the early ones at least, when you jumped, that jump arc is how you would jump, and it doesn't matter how long you press the jump button for. If you tapped it or you held it in, you would jump the same distance and the same height. So the games were like, they were intentionally designed a certain way to get you to play the game more and more and be more like, you'd have to learn what the game was and learn the characters and learn where everything could be hit from with the whip and stuff like that. Again, none of that's really in Castlevania Lords of Shadow because they turned it into a sort of God of War style game. And again, I'm not complaining, it's a fantastic game, but it's not the original Castlevania. And by the way, I'm not criticising Castlevania Lords of Shadow for not being a Castlevania game. I'm criticising it in the sense that it doesn't live up to the same expectations of what a Castlevania game is. I still consider it wholeheartedly a part of the lore of Castlevania, and it is a Castlevania game, but it's not a Castlevania game, you know. It's really hard to explain. Like I consider it conceptually Castlevania, but not on a gameplay standard and musically and things like that. It's a part of the collection of Castlevania, but not in a sort of modern sense of. I hope you understand. I'm going round in circles here. Anyway, yeah. So the music's fantastic. The graphics are fantastic. The gameplay is probably the best thing about all of the games. So yeah, like you've got these characters who are the Belmonts who are trying to fight off Dracula, and Dracula can be summoned back. When you kill him, he's not truly dead because, you know, like in these games, you know, true evil cannot be defeated and things like that. They'll always find a way to return. I don't believe that myself personally, but that's another story. But yeah, like Dracula always comes back. He can be summoned back, or he'll come back after a certain period of time. No matter how many times you kill him or try and seal him away, kind of like Diablo, it'll always find a way to come back. So the Belmont family is both blessed and cursed to have to use their generational lineage to go and fight Dracula, because nobody else can. They're the Belmonts, you know. And I know these other games that I've not played in the series that are on the Game Boy Advance and on the DS and things like that. I know these games have other characters that are sort of closely knit to the Belmont family, and they've either been trained by the Belmonts or they've grown up with that Belmont or whatever that's going to fight them. I've not played those games, so I'm just speaking strictly from my knowledge of what games I have played and what I know of the lore. But yeah, Belmont's the sort of main family that fights Dracula. And I'm going to go slightly into spoiler territory here, because these two are my favourite sort of the series, because I love Rondo of Blood, which is on Dracula X, and I love Castlevania Lords of Shadow. And I just like the way how, even though it's like a reboot of the franchise, I love how they sort of explained Lords of Shadow's story. Like, this is going to be spoiler territory now, so like, I don't know how long I'll be with the spoilers, so just, if you don't want to hear them, it's best to just stop now. But yeah, essentially what happens in Castlevania Lords of Shadow is, at the end of Lords of Shadow you fight Satan. You don't fight Dracula, you fight Satan, which is totally awesome. Like, that is, like, I'm a Christian, that's every Christian's dream, to total hook Satan, you know, like, that's fantastic. Although it's like physically impossible, like he'd just kill anybody, but except God. But yeah, it's just such an awesome concept to have to fight Satan at the end of a game. It's quite controversial and stuff like that as well, especially for people of faith like myself. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. But yeah, so like, Dracula doesn't exist in Lords of Shadow. In Castlevania Lords of Shadow, it's a reboot. It doesn't exist. So essentially, from what I gather, like, I'm no expert on the lore or anything like that, but what I gather is, when you kill, or when you defeat Satan, and that fight, by the way, is one of the most horrendous fights I've ever fought in any game ever. It's the most difficult thing I've ever done. But when you defeat him, something about the Lords of Shadow that you've defeated ends up being a part of either the mask, or it's something to do with defeating Satan. It's quite hard to explain, but it ends up that Gabriel Belmont ends up being Dracula, which is, for an awful lot of people, the same as when in Bionic Commando, like, Nathan Spencer's arm is his wife. Spoilers, sorry. Told you there were going to be spoilers. But yeah, like, people, there's an awful lot of people who don't quite understand that. Like, not that they couldn't understand, actually. It's more to do with the fact that they just couldn't get their head around, like, how could this Belmont become Dracula? He wasn't even bitten by a vampire, you know. But I don't know, it kind of makes sense. Like, part of that evil that was left from Satan, or part of the evil that was left from the mask, or, you know, again, I'm quite fuzzy on the lore, but from what I'm gathering, from what I remember of the game, and I've not played any of the DLC. There's 2 DLC packs after Lords of Shadow is finished, so like, if I'm missing something, please forgive me. But from what I think, from what I reckon of the game, it seems like this evil was somehow left within Gabriel, and you can tell throughout the game, all that Gabriel cares about is getting his wife back. All he cares about is getting his wife. He wants to bring his wife back from the dead, and that's all he cares about. And as the game progresses on, you can see him getting pulled more and more into the darkness, because that's all he cares about. He doesn't care about anything, he doesn't care about anyone, he's only doing this to bring his wife back. He doesn't care about who gets hurt in the process, he just wants his wife back. So you can see this sort of, it's like, you like, on a base level, you would think, well, that's quite noble. He just wants his wife. He just wants to be with his wife. But then on another level, you're thinking, right, well, he's starting to get into this sort of dark place. Like, and I don't feel comfortable using this as a sort of comparison, but like the Star Wars 1, 2, and 3 trilogy, how Anakin is kind of like, he doesn't want, you know, his wife or his girlfriend, or I can't even remember her name, is it Padme or something? I don't know. Is that the handmaid? I don't know, but you know what I mean. Like, he doesn't want her to die. So everything that he's doing, he's becoming darker because he doesn't want her to die. He wants he wants this power to stop her from dying. And it's the same with Gabriel. Like, Gabriel is looking for this mask that apparently whenever you place it on someone's face, they're brought back from the dead. So he's trying to defeat the Lords of Shadow and reconcile all, like, the three of them into this mask, which is meant to bring people back from the dead. So it's kind of a similar comparison to the Star Wars. They're like the prequels, but like it's kind of not at the same time. It's like and I don't want anybody to think that's like me disgracing like Castlevania with that sort of thinking, but because I don't really like the original, like, the prequels to the Star Wars anyway. But yeah, it's kind of on the same sort of level. So yeah, at the very end, Gabriel becomes Dracula. He's the first Belmont, and Alucard, who is the son of Dracula, is the first son of Dracula, is the beginning of the Belmont line properly. Like Gabriel is this guy who kind of like chose on the name Belmont, and his name's Gabriel. He kind of pulled on the name of Belmont and become this slayer of evil, but he become evil as well. So it's the curse of the Belmont family to have to keep on defeating their originator, their father, like the one that's at the top of their sort of hierarchy in terms of like the family tree. They've got to keep on doing it. And again, this is just me gleaning from Lords of Shadow, but like when you get to things like Dracula X, it's further down the family tree, and you're fighting a descendant of Simon Belmont, which is Richter Belmont, or Richter Belmont. And what I love about Dracula X, Rondo of Blood, and Symphony of the Night, is that Symphony of the Night's a direct sequel to Rondo of Blood. It's really cool. It's really, really awesome. Symphony of the Night starts off at the very end of Rondo of Blood, where Richter's fighting Dracula. And when you're fighting Dracula, and you defeat, like at the very beginning, you're Richter Belmont of the previous game, which is Rondo of Blood. So in Symphony of the Night, you start off as Richter, and you're at the very final stage where you're going up the steps and you're going to fight Dracula, and it's really, really cool. It's fantastic, and it brings back the original Rondo of Blood, and it feels great. It feels fantastic, So you're fighting Dracula, and if you start to get defeated, Maria will come in and help you and grant you some invincibility time and stuff like that. So you can instead of getting defeated right at the beginning, you can finish the fight with Dracula and then get into it with Alucard. So like when you get into it with Alucard, though, what I love about Symphony of the Night is the fact that because it's a direct sequel, it tells the story of what happened to Richter afterwards. And yeah, apparently right, there's Dracula, but he's got like an evil dark priest as well. There's like his right hand man. His name's Shaft. Who's that dark priest walking down the street? Shaft, like his name's Shaft. That's our Shaft, And apparently at the end of Dracula X, Rondo of Blood, Shaft sort of like like I've not played the game in a while, so like forgive me if I'm getting this mixed up or fuzzy or something, but what I remember is that you had to fight Richter as Alucard in Dracula's castle at one point in Symphony of the Night, and it's amazing because Richter's my favourite Belmont, precisely because he's called Richter, which is like the name of one of my favourite bad guys from Total Recall, like one of my favourite bad guys ever. So like Richter Belmont, and I thought, yes, Richter's awesome, he's totally cool. But you've got to fight him because Shaft has either corrupted his mind or hypnotized him or something like that, or he's cursed or something like that by Shaft, and you've got to defeat him. The thing is, though, is that there's an item in Symphony of the Night that if you collect it and then you go and fight Richter Belmont, you can see this little green orb floating around Richter, and that's the thing that's controlling him. So you can finish the game by defeating Richter, and that's the end of it. Or you can get this item and destroy the orb that you can see around him, and that doubles the length of the game. It's like, when you've done that, and Shaft is defeated, and like that orb is, you know, destroyed, and Richter's free from it, there's like another dimensional portal opens up above the castle, above Dracula's castle, and this sort of inverted Dracula's castle comes down and touches the spire of the other castle, and then it's the whole game again, but the game's been designed so that it could be played upside down as well. And that is totally, when I played it, it blew my mind. I was like, I defeated Richter to start off with, and I was like, man, that was good, but I feel so annoyed that Richter had to die. And then I found out that there was a second part to it, that if you find the orb thing, you know, if you find this thing that you can see the orb, and you can defeat the orb, there's a whole other half of the game where you finally fight Dracula at the end. It's absolutely blew my mind. And so yeah, like, I know that Symphony of the Night is on the PlayStation Network. It's on the SEN or whatever it's called now. You can download it. It's a PS1 classic. If you've not got Dracula X Chronicles, I highly suggest that. It's only in America though. It was only like the PS1 release of the game on the PlayStation Network was only released in America. So if you've got an American account, you can put some money in the American account, go and get it, because it's absolutely one of the most sublime experiences you'll play as a 2D platformer that's like sort of this combination of Castlevania and Metroid, and it's the perfect fusion. And it just, you know, you pick up items, you upgrade your sword, you upgrade your character, you know, you get new abilities, you can pick up shields and armor and consumable items and stuff like that. It took the concept of Castlevania, of the Belmonts going to fight Dracula, to another level. Like, it expanded the concept of what a 2D platformer could be, and it just made it absolutely incredible. So I'm not going to speak for much longer, because that's been 37 minutes. No, not again. Yeah, Castlevania is fantastic. If you have any opportunity at all to play any of the Castlevania games, I highly, highly urge you to do so. They are possibly one of my favourite franchises of all time. Fantastic graphics, fantastic music, beautiful gameplay. All of the games, all of them. Like, any of the games at all. Just, if you can get one of them, get one of them. If you can get any more than that, get like Symphony of the Night, get Dracula X Chronicles so you can play Rondo of Blood. I've heard that Rondo of Blood has been released on Wii as a WiiWare title as well now, in English, hopefully. I'm not 100% on that though, but it's been released on the Wii as a WiiWare title. I don't know if it's been translated, but yeah, it's definitely translated on Dracula X Chronicles. So like, get this, because it's got all three games on it: the Dracula X, Rondo of Blood, and Symphony of the Night. That's like, if you just get this one game and play it on the PSP, that's 3 of the Castlevania games right there, done. You know, like, that one title. But if you're a classic gamer and you've never played a Castlevania game before, highly recommend Super Castlevania IV on the SNES. There's Bloodlines on the Mega Drive. There's Vampire's Kiss on the SNES. Like, I think that's like a sequel, not a true sequel. I think the Symphony of the Night was the proper sequel to Rondo of Blood, but Vampire's Kiss is kind of like, it's another story with Richter in it. So I'm not 100% sure on where that sits on the timeline. It might be a prequel or a sequel. I don't know. I'm not 100% on it. But Vampire's Kiss. There's Mirror of Fate on the 3DS, and Mirror of Fate HD's coming out as well, and that's going to be a part of. It's going to be on the PlayStation Network. It's going to be on the Xbox Live, but it's also going to be in a package. They're going to, before Lords of Shadow 2 comes out, they're going to bring out the Castlevania Lords of Shadow collection, which is this game plus the 2 download packs, that like the extra downloadable content for this, plus Mirror of Fate HD. I don't know how much it's going to cost, but that sounds like it's probably going to be a full price thing, because it's going to be this game plus the 2 download packs plus the Mirror of Fate HD, and it's also going to include it's like an exclusive demo to Lords of Shadow 2 before it comes out. So Castlevania Lords of Shadow Collection, Dracula X Chronicles, Super Castlevania IV. The original Castlevania games are really good as well, but I've heard an awful lot of people ragging on Castlevania 2, and most people didn't like. I don't know, but like I've not heard an awful lot about Castlevania 3. I've played the original though, and that's really fun. It's really good. So yeah, any Castlevania games that you think you might be able to get a hold of, just get them. There's tons of them as well. There's so many Castlevania games. Some of them, like the Game Boy Advance ones and the Wii, the DS ones, are kind of like the Metroidvania style ones. It's almost like after they done the linear ones on the old 8-bit and 16-bit consoles, they went full blown with the Metroidvania style ones, and then they were like, right, okay, Metroidvania, let's put it on the Game Boy Advance, let's put it on the Wii, I keep on saying the Wii, the DS, let's put it on the Game Boy Advance and the DS, and like all these big ones that were like really big maps and stuff like that. There's also on the PlayStation Network, if you're wanting something a little more updated from the original, the very first one, there's Castlevania Chronicles as well on the PlayStation Store, and that's a PS1 classic. That's also only on the American store. It's a remake of Castlevania 1, but on the PlayStation. It's like the graphics have been redone to look more like the Symphony of the Night style graphics and stuff like that. Castlevania Chronicles. So there is a difference. There's Castlevania Chronicles and Castlevania Dracula X Chronicles. This is the PSP one, and the Castlevania Chronicles is a PS1 classic, and that's a remake of the first game. So yeah, hope you found that interesting or enlightening in any way, shape or form. But yeah, Castlevania is fantastic. You should go play them if you've got a chance. Anyway, that's me again. I'll probably be back soon with another video. I've got another one recorded actually, I've just not uploaded it yet, so yeah, I'll just upload that as well at some point, and I'll be back soon. So let me know what you think in the comments below, or all this other garbage that people say to try and get subscribers and all that. So like, yeah, just comments below, let me know what you think, start a conversation with me, it's fine, and maybe even do a video response, I don't know. Anyway, thanks for your time guys, see you later.